Module 7. Hi, this is Joe, and I'm going to go through the AutoCAD Online course. And today we're going to talk about dimensions. And so I'll select our Module 7 link, and that'll open up our web page, which will discuss some of the features of AutoCAD and dimensioning. Dimensioning is the process of conveying the desired information to someone, showing the length of objects or the distance or angles between objects. In other words, it provides us with the measurements that we need to build something. When working with this system, we want to be able to use basic dimensions, and those would be linear dimensions, which would be horizontal or vertical. This would be considered a linear dimension. A line dimension, which is dimensions that are on an angle and they're even with the surface that they are giving the measurements for. Angular dimensions, which will give us angles like 30 degrees, 45. Diameter or radius dimensions, which will give us the sizes of our circular features. Ordinal dimensions, which are quite often used by people in manufacturing. Ordinal dimensions will specify a 0 point on the drawing and then dimension everything relative to that 0 point. We'll look at using leaders by putting notes on, and we'll also look at how we move dimensions and how to edit them. So when we get into the dimensions, we have a number of different dimensions, and these are all set up within a dimension style dialog box. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to tie in some of the material from the web page to our class assignment. And so if we look over here on the right hand side, we have our PowerPoint, which will explain the assignment from the reading of chapter 7 in the textbook. And then we also have this assignment right here, P7-1. And what that is that's a drawing from, I think it's from Module 5. I could be wrong, but I believe we did this where we drew this, and then we are going to dimension it now in Module 7. So to get started, if we click on this P7-1, you can download and open this file, and what we're going to do is to dimension this object. And the first thing that we're going to do is to take a look at these different dimensioning commands like dim linear, dim style, dim aligned. Everything has the word dim in front of it. It actually has a separate command mode that the software goes into when we start to work with dimensions. We'll create a layer, and then we'll go through these different steps for doing things like modifying a dimension style. It's really a pretty complicated way to do something that we could really just go to the last page of the assignment sheet and look at how the dimensions are laid out and then create it. So I have no problem with that if you decide to say, hey, I think I got this. I'm going to take a look at the dimensions that are required for this drawing, and I'm just going to go ahead and put those on. But to be fair, we'll go through it step by step per the book. Okay, so getting back to my web page, if I click on P7 student drawing, you should have this done, but I've provided it for you as well. We can click on that link and we can open this drawing. And my AutoCAD is waiting. It's launched the drawing, and I can see this is a mechanical part that I drew a couple of modules ago. Okay, the PDF I downloaded to the desktop, and I kind of have it shrunk to the side so I can take a look at it. And in this lesson, what we're going to do is we are going to essentially use a number of different dimensioning commands. The first step in the exercise is to create a new layer called dimension, and that will be a color of blue and a line type of continuous. And so we'll come over here to our ribbon, and on the Home tab we can go to our Layer Manager and we can create a new layer. And the layer we'll create we'll name Dimension, and so we'll say New Layer. We'll type in the word Dimension. The color for that will be blue, and the line type will be continuous. And while we're on the layer dialog box, what I'd also like to do is to show you how layers can have line weights. If you notice that the drawing that's been opened, it's kind of thin, kind of plain looking. And what we can do is we can enable a line weight. If I were to turn off this object layer, you'll notice that it disappears. I can turn it back on by turning this light bulb back on. And so the object lines are on this object layer. But what's missing on here is a line weight. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a line weight to it by clicking on this line here. And typical line weight for an object line is 0.5 mm. And you'll see that with mechanical design pencils. They'll sell them in 0.5, 0.7, or 0.3, depending on which line we're using. Now, even though I've enabled a line weight, we don't see it yet because I need to turn on the LWT button here down at the bottom. And so once I've done that, I can see my line weights. And that's the kind of look we're starting to go for as we start to get better with our drawings. We want to use proper drafting techniques and something called the alphabet lines. And the alphabet lines will go through and talk to us about what the difference is between a center line and an object line. We can also beef up our center line. I'll click on that line weight and I'll choose 0.3 mm. I'll say OK, and we'll also notice that that is now more bold and easier to see. I'll make our dimension layer active by clicking on it and then hitting the green check mark. So we're ready to start dimensioning now, and what I'm going to do is just collapse my layer manager and I'm going to start to dimension. If we look at the PDF, it starts to explain all these different ways to use dimensions, and the first thing it wants us to do is to create a dimension style. And so it says select the dimension style from the dimensions panel. It's a little tricky to find. If we go to the annotate page, dimension style is actually this down arrow. And as long as we're talking, in the previous modules, what we've always done is we've hit this down arrow here and we've turned on our menu bar. So I'll do that. And then down here at the bottom, if you have these things showing as icons, click on one of them with the right mouse button and uncheck use icons, and so we can have the words there. Alright, so how do we set up a dimension style? One way is to get the dimension pull down and then to choose dimension style. In the new interface, the way we're going to do that is by clicking on this little arrow here. And so whenever you see this little arrow in the corner of a ribbon, what that is it's a style feature. And so I can do style features for text, dimensions, leaders, tables. Anything with this small arrow will have some sort of a dialog box for it. So I'll click on this little arrow and I have a standard dimension style, and we can see what it's going to look like. This is the way it's set up. We're going to modify that per our directions in step 4 by going to the line tab, and we're going to take a look at the baseline, and in the dimension line section enter 0.50 in the baseline space. And so what we're going to do is change this number from 5/8 to 0.50. Excuse me, that's the wrong one. Here it is. And so we're going to change this to 0.5. And all that's going to do is specify a distance of 0.5 between the different dimensions that we put on. We'll also tweak the extension, the extend beyond dimension line, and change this from 0.180 to 0.125. And I'm not really sure why the author has us do that. It's not really that significant that we're going to see that much. We'll also go to symbols and arrows, and we'll change the arrow size to 0.125. We'll also take a look at our primary units tab. On our primary units tab, we'll set the units to dimensions in decimal and a precision of 2 decimal places, which it already is. On the text tab, we'll set that text height to be 0.125. And that'll ensure that our text height is 1/8 of an inch. Once we've done that, we can choose OK, and then we can say close it. Setting it current is the same thing, but there's only one dimension style, and so we'll close that. Step number 5 says from the Object Snap toolbar, we're going to set the center option to be on. And so if I right click on Object Snap and I go to Settings, what it wants me to do is clear all these out, which I really don't think is the greatest way to do it. Typically I'll run with Endpoint and with Center, and we'll look at how we can work with this and modify it. But for right now, per our directions, we'll turn on the Center Object Snap and we'll say OK. If I click on the O Snap with my right mouse button, you'll notice the center is slightly depressed. Step number 6, invoke the dim linear command and draw the linear dimension as shown in P7-2. And so what it's going to have us do is to put a dimension in from this hole to this hole. And if I go to my dimension command linear and I turn on my O Snap and I hover over an arc, you'll notice that it grabs the center of that. And if I hover over this arc, it also acquires the center. And then I can put that dimension on. Now this is okay, but it's really not my way of doing it. And the reason is because you'll notice that this line crosses over a center line. And it's really better to have this from the end of this line right here. And so what I would suggest is to turn on the Object Snap feature for Endpoint as well. And we can move these with a grip and make this a little neater by pulling it back to that endpoint. And that way we get a little bit of a gap between the extension line and the dimension lines. Okay, next step is going to be to use dim aligned and to create an aligned dimension. And so if we take a look at the figure on P7-4, we're going to create a dimension from here to here and from here to here using a dim continuous. So getting back to our drawing here, we're going to go here to dim aligned, and what it has us do in the book is to kind of hover and acquire the center point. Again, I'm going to say I'll show you what they do. They go from center point to center point, and then they bring this dimension out here, 2-inch dimension. But again, we're covering over our tracks for our center marks, and notice what happens if I try to fix it. If I use the endpoint, it's fine, but I have to make sure I go from endpoint to endpoint and that they're even. So you have to be a little bit careful with that. I'll hit escape to clear out the grips, and I'm going to turn off this QP button, Quick Properties, which keeps kind of popping up and telling me what the properties of different lines are. The next thing that we'll do after we put in that dimension is use a dimension continuous command. And what that will do is from our last dimension allow us to create another dimension to the center of that part. And then we'll hit escape. So we've got our dimension from here to here and from here to here. And it's slightly off. Okay? And that could be because of the way I did dimension it from endpoint to endpoint. Let's try that one more time and see if we can clean that up. So I'll go back here to my dim aligned command, and this time I will hold the shift and the right mouse button to ensure I only get center. And I'll get center, shift right mouse click, center. I'll put this dimension out here, and then I'll get the dim continue, and I'll continue it to the center. And this time it's cleaner. It's coming in at an even 3 inches, which is what I want. So it does add up those tolerances. I can pull these other dimensions back by putting a grip on them, bringing it out to this endpoint, doing the same over here to make it look a little bit neater. Okay, I'll hit the escape key to clear out my grips. If I want, I can pull this dimension also out so that they're nice and even. The directions in step number 8 ask us to draw this center line. And since the center line is coming in with the geometry, we're going to bypass that part of the instruction. but you're welcome to go through and put in this line right here. That is going to be a length of 6.5 inches at an angle of 315 degrees. The next thing that we'll do in step number 9 is to make another align dimension, and what we'll do is to create an align dimension that will show us the distance from the slot to this line. What I recommend we do on this is to use a couple of different object snaps where we'll dimension to the center of this hole, and we'll use a perpendicular dimension object snap to acquire a perpendicular measurement to this line. So again, I can say dimension aligned, and I can say from the center, and then I'll bring this line out and you'll see I'm tracking. What I'll do is I'll right mouse click and I'll select perpendicular, and then I will select this red line here, and then I will bring my dimension line out. So again, I have acquired another dimension here. I can pull these lines back if I need to, but I have to be a little bit careful because I may lose my dimension. So let's see what we can get. Yes, I get a little bit too much on it, so I have to be careful here not to bring it out too far. Alright, next thing that we'll do is to put a few more dimensions in. What we'll do then is to put in another align dimension for the width between flats on this polygon shape here. It actually kind of looks like a bolt head. And so we'll say align dimension from this point to this point. We'll bring that out at 1.75. Alright, that's figure P7-11. And then we're going to go through and we're going to put some angular dimensions on our drawing. And so we're going to take a look at this figure here. And what we're going to do is we're going to put in this 45-degree dimension, and we're also going to put in this 22.5. And again, the directions are a little bit off. In our directions, it shows this little line right here, which we don't use. It's parallel to this line, but it's not the same as what it is the author is showing us in this figure. So we'll fix it by coming in here with an angular dimension, and we'll create an angular dimension then from this red center line to this red center line, and then we'll place that dimension right about here. So we've got a 45-degree dimension for that. And then we'll do the same thing over here where we'll put in this 22.5-degree dimension between this line here and this horizontal line here. And you want to try to be neat. And we get our 22.5 angular dimension. Lastly, we're going to go and put some radial dimensions on here. And if we take a look at our PDF, we're pretty much at the end here. We're going to go in and put these radial dimensions and complete our drawing exercise. And so we'll start off with this 2-inch radius dimension. And so we'll come in here and we'll select radius. We'll select this arc right here. We'll pull that dimension up and out, and we'll get a 2-inch radius dimension on that. We'll come back to our radius dimension. We will select this arc right here, and we'll bring this out also, and we'll get a 6-inch radius dimension. Again, we'll continue with our radius. I can right click and say repeat dim radius. I can select this arc here, pull this out, right mouse click, repeat dim radius, get this radius here, right mouse click, repeat dim radius, select this radius here, right mouse click, repeat dim radius, get this arc here, and we have one more, which will be this, right mouse click, and for this one we want diameter, so I'm going to hit escape, and instead of choosing dim radius, I'm going to choose diameter, and then I'll select this arc and I'll place the dimension. Okay, we'll save this exercise as our initials lab 7, and so I can say save as. I will save this to my desktop, and I will change this to JC dash lab 7. Hit save. And that completes the drawing for Module 7.